our focus on US President Donald Trump, who's now mocking previous US President Donald Trump, my apologies, who's mocking US President Joe Biden for his age. Donald Trump has taken a swipe at US President Joe Biden during his campaign event in Manchester. It was Donald Trump's first campaign event since President Joe Biden officially entered the 2024 election race. And Trump used it to disparage Biden and portray their differences in stark and apocalyptic terms. He argued that a Biden re-election would lead to anarchy. And here's a bit of a background to why he says so. Now, Trump mocked Biden's use of a cheat sheet. This is a reference to his advanced knowledge of a journalist's question. Now, the US president was recently spotted with a cheat sheet during Wednesday's press conference. It revealed that the 80-year-old commander-in-chief had advanced knowledge of a question from a journalist. In fact, a question from an LA Times reporter reads, and let me quote what that question said, "How are you squaring your domestic priorities like reshoring semiconductors manufacturing with alliance-based foreign policy?" But it's an open secret that Joe Biden's use of cheat sheets goes back all the way to his first press conference ever since he took over US presidency in the year 2021. Interestingly, the White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre has claimed that it was entirely normal for President Biden to be holding a cheat sheet with advanced knowledge of a journalist's question at a joint press conference. But Biden's cheat sheet has given enough ammunition to his Republican rival, who used this situation to mock the president's cognitive abilities, despite Biden's physician reporting that Biden is in good health. Let's listen in to what Donald Trump had to say.
The choice in this election is now between strength and weakness, between success or failure, between safety or anarchy, between peace or conflict, and prosperity or catastrophe. We are living in a catastrophe. With your vote on November 5th, 2024, we're going to crush Joe Biden and the White House, that gorgeous, beautiful White House. We have to take it back. We're going to beat him at the ballot box, and we're going to settle our unfinished business. It's unfinished. Biden announced his presidential campaign by, get this, a prepackaged video. I was going to do that for you today. I'll do a little video, send it up to New Hampshire. You wouldn't have been very happy about that. But when you're running for president, you think at least one time you'd get up and say, "I'm running for president." Where am I going? Where the hell am I going? I want to get out. Oh, no, over there, over there. A prepackaged video that took supposedly 7 takes to get it right, if right is what you want to call it. In it, he says he's running because Trump and MAGA pose a threat to democracy. Can you believe it? Got to explain. MAGA is Make America Great Again, right? No threat there.
But can Donald Trump make America great again by mocking the current US president? That's a question we'll be deep diving into. And for that, let me introduce my guests today. I'm joined in by Corinne Clark, a Republican strategist, joining me live from Washington, D.C. Also joined in by Nicole Brenner-Schmitz, who's a Democratic strategist, joining me live from Washington, D.C. as well. Many thanks to you, Nicole and Corinne, for joining in. Corinne, if I might begin with you, why should the president's age be a concern for Donald Trump when he himself is 76 years old?
I think Donald Trump is clear to make this about more than age. It's actually about about Biden's mental fitness and how it compares to Donald Trump's. The White House keeps citing that report that says the doctor says that Joe Biden is in great health. Well, that is a physical report. It is not a mental health report. Biden has actually refused to take a mental fitness test. And when asked about it, he and his wife both laughed that off because they don't think the American people deserve to see the results of that test. So I think this is about more than age. It's about quality of candidates. And honestly, we can say whatever we want about it, but Joe Biden speaks the loudest when he can't complete his own sentences.
All right, Nicole, I'd like you to, in fact, share your thoughts. At the same time, let's also refer to Donald Trump's name calling. He's often referred to President Joe Biden as Sleepy Joe, Slow Joe. While it may have worked earlier, will such mockery work in the long run, especially during the race to the White House?
I mean, look, this has been Donald Trump's MO to the entire time he's been running. He's always created terrible nicknames and mocked people, and this is straight out of his playbook. There was no reason to expect that any of this behavior would have matured or become better for this next presidential election. The reality is, yeah, the quality of candidates does matter. Donald Trump was campaigning in New Hampshire last night with a convicted January 6th insurrectionist. I mean, these are the choices he's making. He continues to talk about January 6th and the 2020 presidential election and go back, and that's not what the voters are interested in. We see in poll after poll that, particularly amongst independents, they want to look forward. We want to look into what this country needs to be doing and where it's going, and not rehash a 2020 election that was fair and decided by the voters.
Do you agree when Corinne just highlighted the fact that what Donald Trump is talking about has nothing to do with age, rather it is to do with the mental health of the US president, and that the checkup that he's taken is purely physical, is nothing to do with his mental health?
The President Biden is in fine mental condition. This is an arbitrary accusation to say that he's not mentally fit, and they are throwing around his age. That's always what's continues to be cited. And yes, he's older. I'm sure this will be a conversation for the next 2 years, but Joe Biden is leading this country. He has led us through the COVID crisis. He's passed an infrastructure bill that both parties were desperate to get done, a bipartisan infrastructure bill that had been lingering in US politics for a decade now, that was desperately needed. He wants to continue. It's what he said in his video. He wants to continue, he wants to finish the job. We have no reason for Joe Biden to need to take a whatever the test is that was mentioned. It's very typical that presidents go get a physical bill of health once a year and it's released to the public. That's just normal. It's not because he felt like he was releasing it due to Republicans asking for it. That is standard procedure for presidents, that once a year they have a physical, and that physical is made aware to the general public.
All right, Corinne, the cheat sheets have had a huge role to play in, speculating about Joe Biden's mental health. The White House claims that it's entirely normal for the president to use cheat sheets. Why is it being considered problematic at all?
The most problematic part about the particular cheat sheets that we saw Biden with earlier this week is not that he had a list of reporters and their faces. I think sometimes people need that kind of cue. I know a lot of congressional staffers that do that kind of thing for their representatives. But the worst part is that these cue cards, they showed the questions, which shows a coordination between the White House and the media to give Joe Biden a heads up on the questions that are going to be asked in the press conference. He gives very few press conferences as it is, and now we know that he's had a lot of preparation for them. There's no one going to catch him off guard with a question. He's never going to answer a question off the cuff. He has had time for his staff to prepare the answers to the questions and then provide him with notes on how to answer those questions, because he is not prepared to do so without notes. I think that speaks so much to his ability, way more than every Democratic strategist who will go on TV and say, well, his mental health is fine. There's no reason to test him. He's fine. And that's all the proof that they need, apparently, is someone who is not a doctor to say his mental health is fine. I mean, that's how I feel personally.
Nicole, I think
only
you
record we have.
Okay, Nicole wanted to add something to it. Nicole, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I'm just going to say, like, these kind of, first of all, even calling it a cheat sheet is inferring that it's in some way like a bad thing to have. It's really normal for sometimes to know sort of what kind of questions are possibly coming and have some preparation in front of it. That doesn't mean that the reporters have to ask that question. Doesn't mean that other ones aren't asked. He answered plenty of questions in addition to those, but it's, I've worked for a lot of principals. It's very typical for us to have preparation for him of here's what we expect is probably coming at you in this, and here are like the key points that you should hit on if these questions are asked. That's
Right.
not an odd thing to have happen with these principles in
All right.
politics on either side of the aisle.
All right. Nicole, Biden has rarely allowed himself to be grilled by the media since taking office in January of 2021, which, of course, is also being looked at as a sharp contrast to Donald Trump, even though he had a troubled relationship. But let's not forget that when Biden took over, he promised a reset in his relationship with the media. But that's not really happened because the American press is calling out the fact that there are fewer press conferences with Biden's presence in them. Is this going to now be a potential disadvantage for Joe Biden?
I don't think it is. I don't think that the American press calling that is something that the American public is super angry and upset about. And I think as we see him go into the campaign, he's going to be on the stump and he's going to be out with them a lot more in the next 2 years. You have to remember in 2020, we were, running more virtual campaigns from COVID, I mean, and whatnot. And so this is going to be a presidential campaign that is much more traditional in that sense, that he's going to be at events and with the public and with the press for the next 2 years in a way that COVID limited for safety reasons in 2020.
Corinne, what do you think? Will the lack of active participation with the U.S. media have a role to play in the 2024 race to the White House?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people remember that in the Trump administration, he was very open with the press, even though it was a combative relationship, not only with press conferences, but the tweeting that people talk so much about. He was one of the most transparent presidents there ever has been, because he commented so openly, unedited, on everything from his own person, not through his staff, not through a press secretary, but through himself. I think Biden will really struggle to keep up with the routine that President Trump has, where he addresses these questions so straightforward, in person, at rallies, at press conferences, online, through Truth Social. And Joe Biden is somebody who calls a lid at 10 a.m. And that is not going to work in this campaign. He got to hide a lot behind COVID policies, and he's not going to be able to do that in 2024. And I think it's going to be more and more difficult for Democrats to defend his lack of mental fitness when that becomes clear, when he is actually put in front of people a little bit more than he has been.
Interestingly, cue cards have always been a permanent fixture during Biden's campaign trail, even back in 2020. But is the repeated use of such descriptive notes and cue cards indicate that media is also being controlled?
That the media is being controlled? No, the reporters are free to ask the questions that they want to ask at these press avails. This is not a coordination between the Democratic Party and the media, as much as the Republican side likes to cry out about that.
All right, Corinne, if I could have your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I definitely think there's coordination between the White House and the media. And a lot of it, I don't think it's forcible. I think that a lot of people in the media think that it's a team sport with Joe Biden, that they feel better to make him look better. And part of that is helping him get prepared so that he doesn't look so inept at their press conferences. And they don't want to be the one who humiliates him. So they give the White House a heads up. It's a team sport for them. They are all happy to do it.
Right. Now, Nicole, let's come to the last aspect of it. I'm going to refer to 2019 when former US President Jimmy Carter had expressed concern over the age of the presidential candidates before 2020 election. Here's what he said. I hope there's an age limit. If I were just 80 years old, if I was 15 years younger, I don't believe I could undertake the duties I experienced when I was president. Is it time for a maximum age limit for elected officials?
Well, look, I have great respect for former President Carter, and I respect that he felt that about himself. Apparently, we have people on both sides of the aisle who are older and believe that they are the best within their party to lead not just their party, but this country. I think it's for the American voters. And this is, again, not a partisan thing, to decide who do they have. We have primaries. We have the opportunity to elect a new generation into leadership. And that's the democratic system we have. So the American people need to make a decision if they think that they're leadership is too old, there's opportunities for other people to run, and there's opportunities to elect different people. That's an
Right,
available
right.
option for them. So that's something for the American public. I don't think we need to name an age that cuts off. But if that's something the American public really would like to see, then there can be a grassroots campaign and a lot of pressure on that, and they could look to Congress to pass a law that makes
Right.
that a possibility.
And it
So it
does
would
seem
really have
like,
to be something that you would start to feel like the American voters want to see happen.
absolutely, and I do agree with you, because all my research indicated that several polls were in fact indicating that American majorities have time and again, expressed their views that there should be a maximum age limit for elected officials. Corinne, I'd like you to give your thoughts, and I'll close this discussion with that.
I think overall, I do agree with Nicole. This is something for the American people to decide. And we do have a primary system that allows us to rule out within our own party candidates that we think are too old. I think within each party, we have to strive for fair primaries to make sure voices are heard, to make sure those primaries are not too controlled by the establishment of the party, to make sure that we are actually choosing the candidates that we want. And as long as we can make sure that is clear, then I don't think there needs to be an official rule about age. It should always be about candidate quality. And as long as our voices can be heard, then I don't think we need to add more regulation on that.
Many thanks to you, Corinne and Nicole, for sharing your precious inputs and thoughts. It's always been a pleasure to speak to you.